Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light and this is my channel. Before we get started, if you would please give this video a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed and you'd like to be, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Also, if you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, please click that bell. But also notice that when you do click the bell, somewhere on your screen, you will be given 3 options. 1, to be notified every time content goes up. 2, to be notified occasionally when content goes up. And 3, to be notified rarely when content goes up. So please click until you get the option that you would like. Serko and Digsy on the King's Second Expedition by Jeremy T. Narrated by Exit Light. The sun sets for the 3rd time during a search and rescue expedition on Jaleka, known by the common folk as the Haunted Isle. Though the formation of the island is all a story of its own, the happenings are truly what keep hardened sailors away from its shores, and even kings from its riches. Serko of Hans Rock sits in a cabin on the eastern coast of the island that had been built 2 years prior by a group of settlers that had gone missing. Serko and a dozen others volunteered to travel to the island to investigate the happenings and establish a settlement in the name of King Tyrus. It is the group's 3rd night on the island and they are running low on supplies. The group decided to travel inland to see if they could find the missing settlers. Serko, being the best fisherman, stays behind and begins the stockpile. Only Serko and his dog Digsy remain at the camp on the coast as the sun quickly sets on the quiet island. Haven't had a catch this massive in quite a long time. The fish are practically jumping out of the water here. He laughs as his dog devours the bloody entrails. As the moon begins to rise, a chill flows throughout the small cabin. Serko searches for any leftover dried wood they might have brought, but he will have to settle for some fresh timber he had cut just the day before. He thinks about letting Digsy in the cabin now that the rest of the team are away, just in case the cloudless sky above turns to a storm, which it has been known to do. "Let's throw some more log in the fire and warm up. What do you say, boy?" Serko says to himself, unsure if the wood will fully light. This sends Digsy, who was a relatively tame dog for his age and pedigree, into a frantic barking fit. Serko does his best to calm the fire with prodding. Eventually the fire settles down with a whistle, but Digsy remains on edge, barking a rumble into Serko's already ringing ears. "Quiet down! Digsy! Enough, boy!" he shouts, wondering why he even brought the pup in the first place. Of course, Digsy reminded him of his beloved Tantra, the woman whom he'd married and gifted Digsy to just months before her untimely demise. But with all the barking, he couldn't even think of her. Instead, he thought of how much he wanted to kill the dog. But he was not that type of man. "Here, Diggs," he proclaims as he flicks the slimy fillet just under the dog's head. Digsy doesn't even give it a smell. The dog is dead set on the tree line just ahead of the cabin, across the clearing. Serko, with a bit of confusion, looks towards the tree line and focuses his eyes. It's a solid black night, with just a soft haze of the moon. Suddenly, an outline catches his sight. Serko sees what appears to be a man standing just on the tree line. He can't tell if he is facing the cabin or not, so he shouts. The man doesn't seem to react or even move much. Serko suspects it might be someone from his team, so he heads inside quickly and lights a torch. He comes back outside and begins to wave it and continues his calls for the lonesome man's attention. He pauses but hears no calls in return. Instead, the moonlight seems to devour the man back into the trees. Serko is startled. He places the lit torch upon its holder on the outside of the cabin, and he bends down to assure Digsy. Without hesitation, the dog snaps at Serko and nicks his knuckles, drawing a bit of blood. Digsy turns his attention right back to the tree line without a second thought as the shaken Serko heads inside to dress his wound. While wrapping a dry cloth across his hands, he ponders. Should I go after the man? What has gotten into Digsy? This is very unlike the pup. This expedition may have been a mistake. With a sense that something isn't right, Serko decides his team might be in danger. He throws a bucket of water onto the fire and he grabs his sword. The steaming fire dies out with a loud hiss yet again. Serko fights to retain his composure as he observes the freshly forged sword. This sword is reward enough, he thought. I don't need to be a hero. Digsy is young and confused. The dog will calm himself. And just as Serko's mind comes back into the moment, he realizes that Digsy has stopped barking. The confused Serko takes his sword at his waist and heads outside to find the chain and collar that once held Digsy completely unbroken, with no dog in sight. The gutted fish stood untouched at his feet, as well as the torch above, now unlit. Serko adjusts his eyes towards the clearing to look for the dog. Just as he begins to call for Digsy, an outline of the tree line catches his attention yet again. Serko musters up the courage and heads for the outline before it evades him. He crosses the clearing with haste, and as the outline makes way for the shape of a woman. This staggers Serko, but he prevails under the moon's light. He draws closer to the tree line as the woman starts to dive deeper into the thick forest. Finally, Serko enters, only to find the shadows of the trees seemingly playing at his mind. He calls out for anyone who might hear. "Yes, honey?" says a familiar voice from the shadows. Serko knows his mind is befuddled. He calls out for his team. "Abel! John! Willem!" he shouts at his voice's might. No answer. Only the snapping of distant branches growing closer with each breath. As wind begins to blow in and disrupt the leaves above him, he hears a whistling of a tune once sang by his beloved. Serko knows it can't be Tantra. Not here, he thought. Please, not here. The wind turned a chill on Serko's spine, turning him towards the way he came. He ran as fast as he could for the tree line. The further he runs, though, the deeper from the forest edge he seems. He can hear whispers amongst the flowing leaves and moans amongst the bending trees. Serko feels surrounded in his solitude. He stops as he hears a groan from behind him. A shadow of a man reaches out, and without a blink, Serko drives his blade into the belly of a man. A large thud sends the man exploding into dozens of pieces of rotting bark. Serko pulls at his sword, now stuck in the trunk of the decaying tree towering over the young man. 1,000 questions run through Serko's head, and not a single answer could he find. We rot. We rot. Serko stumbles to his feet, clearing his body of the maggots, and tries to reorient himself. The only light is the moon directly above him now. He looks up and prays for Soul's light to guide him from this forsaken forest. "I'm here, honey. Pray no more," says a sweetened voice as the winds calm suddenly. Serko looks ahead of him and sees the moonlight dance across the outline of a woman. She grows closer with each step, and with each step she fades in and out of his vision. Serko knows it can't be his beloved. He backs up slowly, pleading for the woman to leave him be. "Oh, but I did, though you wanted me back. Here I am," she says as her face begins to find detail in Serko's teary eyes. Her beauty is distorted, but her essence feels true to him. Serko backs into a tree and closes his eyes with yet another prayer. "Please, gods of my father, protect me. Soul, guide me from this," he prays, and then silence. He braces for more. Silence. Finally, Serko opens his eyes to find 100 faces carved into the trees staring back at him. He begins to push off the tree trunk at his back until long, dark arms swing painfully around his body, pulling him back. The faces all seem to laugh but make no sound. All Serko can hear is the faint wind in the leaves and then a sudden whisper directly into his ear. "We rot." Serko begins to feel his boots vibrate tremendously and sting his feet with fiery pain. He looks as the dirt below opens up like a mouth to swallow him. Serko can feel his trousers being shredded by thick roots peeling away at his skin with the cloth as he is pulled deeper into the dirt. He screams and screams, but the leaves do not rustle. Serko finally loses the feeling of his legs, and his screams are silenced by the cutting of the voices. "We rot." He grasps his sword with both hands, trying to cut away at the strong roots restraining him. The weight of the forest floor presses hard on his chest as he is pulled deeper and deeper again, snapping each of his ribs like twigs. All that was inside him now flows to the surface of the soil, making fleshy mud, sinking him even deeper still. "We rot." He struggles to keep his head above the ground, but the evil pull buckles his elbows and bloody dirt fills his ears. The taste of liquid iron fills his mouth as he screams, and they're turned to gargles, and gargles turn to muffled groans. He can only see the blackness as his head is finally pulled under with a frantic grasp of air. The pressure grows overwhelming, and Serko clasps both the handle and the blade of his sword so tightly it cuts to the bones. He cannot feel the pain, though, only the fear. The voices still sound, now seemingly in his head. "We rot," they say now, calmer and calmer, as the life is squeezed out of Serko. "We rot." The gruesome groans are carried away with the wind, and all that remains above the tainted ground is Serko's hands, still gripped upon his blade, white-knuckled, and seeping a crimson sap from even under his fingernails, like careful strands of his beloved's hair.